This defendant, fresh from coming downstairs having this horrific event happen to him, there's no doubt, I agree with Mr. Lowen, it must have been terrifying for this defendant to be in his window and have the bottle thrown through and cut his hand. That must have been a horrible event. That's the one chance he has as he came down those stairs. And is it more credible to believe that that's the chance to tell the policeman exactly what happened? And in that version of events, he says, I was staring out the window, staring them down. I called, you guys weren't around. At some point, the bottle came through and hurt me. And then in follow-up questions, he didn't know what was thrown at him, but he did know there were not shots fired at him. And he did know no one was storming his house. That's the chance he had to tell as complete a version and as honest a version as it just happened to him, but he doesn't give his version according to what we heard on the witness stand yesterday. Instead, we have Coglietta's version, and that is the key pertinent part. He doesn't know what was thrown, but he knows that he wasn't fired upon, and they're not storming his house. As the police do their follow-up, and as they find that gun, you'll have the gun in the jury room. And please, I want you to please look at this gun, because why should you believe the government's versions of things? There's a couple of things that highlight that, and there's always a couple of things in every case that weigh more heavily as to why you should believe it as opposed to not. Lisette Kumba didn't know this guy, had never been in his house, didn't know anything about him. How could she know to describe the barrel of a gun? Kelvin, how could he possibly know to describe a scope on a shotgun? In your common everyday life experiences, if you've read about shotguns, seen them on TV, or seen them in person, has anybody ever seen a shotgun with a scope? Yet Kelvin describes it from the outset. Those things tend to corroborate his version, the fact that only they, in their version of events, could see and describe things immediately, and therefore it is more credible to believe than something concocted 10 months later. Why else should you believe the government's version of events? Not a key ingredient, but certainly there's an element of alcohol here. What motive would Coglietta and Conway have for making up the smelling of alcohol, or Conway's opinion that he was under the influence? There's no reason to add that to this case. But again, in every case, there's always one thing that helps you determine why you can believe something as opposed. Do you remember, very impressive guy, and I might butcher his last name, but James Sachi, I think is his name. He came and testified. He's the fellow that's the Dalton police officer. Impressive fellow, great credentials and everything else. At the end of telling us all about his knowledge of the defendant, I said to him, hey, what did the defendant tell you about this case? And he went through A to Z and told us a version. And then in the end I said to him, did he tell you he had been drinking? And from that witness stand, you may remember his answer. Oh, yeah, he said he had been drinking. Now, that's why you believe the government's case, because it's the little, seemingly insignificant things that tend to be credible, because it's more real. It happens in time. It's not 10 or 11 months later when you've had time to think about how does this best fit into a defense theory. It's when it happens at the time.